Well, here's something you don't see every night. First-hand accounts of real-life exorcisms from Catholic priests trained by the Vatican. They say they've seen demons in action. Take a look.
I command you, Satan, enemy of human salvation, acknowledge the justice and goodness of God the Father.
A voice comes out of the living room. Get out.
I am the chosen one. Somebody had to do it.
His back starts to arch and he's like,
depart from the servant of God, whom the Lord has made in his own image.
So he picks up the book and that baby voice again. He goes, I read this book.
Many will dismiss the idea of the devil taking possession of a person. But the priest in this tiny town near the border of Ohio and Indiana is now known all over the world for his work around just that. He never even wanted to become an exorcist and says what he's seen isn't far off the movies.
When I saw a person levitate during an exorcism during my training in Rome, I think I was sitting there with my jaw wide open.
In the face of the enemy.
Famous scenes portray pretty extreme manifestations of the devil.
Your mother sucks cocks and
But this vision claims to capture the authentic exorcism of a woman who'd suffered abuse before turning to drugs and prostitution.
So when an exorcism is performed, the exorcist is in charge of the scene, and nobody should interject or do anything. When I was appointed in 2005, I became one of only about 12 officially appointed exorcists in the United States.
Father Vincent Lampert is one of America's few Vatican-trained exorcists, living there for 3 months to learn how it's done.
So during my time in Rome, I set in on 40 exorcisms and was able to learn firsthand again the church's ministry to those up against the demonic.
His stories of witnessing the devil at work as a qualified exorcist are nothing short of haunting.
So I just wrote this out very quickly about the Pope. Do you want to hear it? Should I read it to you? Okay. He actually said that maybe I'm not a good Christian or something. It's unbelievable, which is really not a nice thing to say. So it's a response from Donald Trump. It says, if and when the Vatican is attacked by ISIS, ISIS, their primary trophy, very few people know this. I read this about 2 months ago. Nobody even believed it. Their primary thing, you've seen what they've done all over the Middle East. Their primary goal is to get to the Vatican. That would be their ultimate trophy. They want to do what they did to all of these magnificent artifacts and all of the beautiful museums that they've totally destroyed all over the Middle East, right? And I didn't know this. I read this like 4 or 5 months ago. I made mention of it 2 months ago, and everyone said, what are you talking about? They thought, I'm kidding. It's true. And now there are stories about it. Not big stories, but there are stories about it. And I was checked by one of the reporters that said, they don't want to talk about that. Then he called up and apologized. The big thing, they want to get to the Vatican. So, if and when the Vatican is attacked by ISIS, which, as everyone knows, is ISIS's ultimate trophy, I can promise you that the Pope would have only wished and prayed that Donald Trump would have been president.
I started praying. She lunged at me like a wild dog. She's like, whoa.
Oh my God.
I think I jumped back 5 feet. And this voice that came out of her mouth said, well, who's he? He has no power over us.
That's what happened when he was trying to help a woman who'd become possessed at the hands of childhood trauma, raped.
And I went over and laid my hands on her head and started praying. And then the demon started laughing uncontrollably at me and says, you can't get rid of us. We've been here too long and you're not strong enough.
So you remember the sound? That's what the voice sounded like?
Oh yeah, usually the manifestation is always, you can't get rid of us. We've been here too long. Again, it's that sense of wanting to instill fear.
Lampert uses various rituals, including insufflation, a breathing prayer, which with one woman roused the devil in a frightening way.
The chair flew back and hit the side of the altar. The person flew up out of the chair, and you heard a shriek, scream.
I mean, hearing that happen and visualizing that happen, the cynic in me says, I can't imagine that being a plausible thing to happen. For someone to fly off a chair and...
I mean, I just breathe, and you would have thought that they were hit with a hurricane force wind. The chair just went back like that. And then the person, you hear this shriek as they come up out of the chair and then fall on the floor.
So that 100%, that's what happened?
That's absolutely.
That's frightening. Father Lampert tells me he's receiving about 1,800 calls, emails and letters every year from people all over the world who believe they're possessed. More than half of those, he says, come from people who aren't even Catholic or religious at all.
When I was first appointed, I would get maybe 3 or 4 calls a week. Now I get like 35 calls a week.
This massive spike in requests, he thinks, is due to religion diminishing around the world.
Because faith is in decline, when people experience something in their lives that they can't really figure out, then it leads them to believe that maybe it's something evil or demonic.
But it's not as simple as believing you're possessed and calling an exorcist. The Catholic Church has strict protocols and processes that priests must follow before deeming an exorcism to be appropriate.
Exorcists are trained to be skeptics. I should be the last person to believe that a person is possessed. Every other possible explanation needs to be exhausted before I make that determination. The very first step of the protocol would be for the person to have some type of psychiatric evaluation.
Those wanting help then have to answer a series of questions covering their psychological history and whether they've had addiction issues. They're also asked if they have had any experience or history of engaging in the occult, witchcraft, black magic, magicians, fortune tellers, crystals, wizards or game boards. Other questions include, have you ever tried to communicate with spirits, demons or the devil itself? And do you truly want to be free of the evil influences you believe are presently affecting you? Will you do what must be done?
I witnessed eyes rolled in the back of the head. I've seen eyes turn completely black, where there's just nothing there but like total darkness, foaming at the mouth.
The Catholic Church doesn't allow filming of exorcisms to protect the identity of those afflicted, but others not sanctioned by the Church have been.
Exorcisms don't take place on a dead-end street at midnight in an abandoned house during a thunderstorm.
So you would normally do an exorcism. Father Lampert always executes the exorcism in a sacred space, like the church itself.
So I would have the book, I would have a crucifix, would come in, and then immediately begin doing the prayer of the church.
He'll then command the demon to depart.
His righteous judgment has damned your pride and envy.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a vaccine by the end of the year. We're doing very well with the vaccine. And I will tell you something, I just literally left a meeting. We're mobilizing our military and other forces, but we're mobilizing our military on the basis that we do have a vaccine. You know, it's a massive job to give this vaccine. Our military is now being mobilized, so at the end of the year, we're going to be able to give it to a lot of people very, very rapidly.
3.5 hours drive north, Father Michael Maginot has conducted exorcisms on 15 different people, some needing more than one session.
Kind of surprising that words would have an effect on, a demon.
I cast you out.
But it does. They hate it. They can't stand the prayers. They can't stand being condemned.
Be gone and stay far away from this creature of God.
We will finally complete the biometric entry-exit visa tracking system, which we need desperately.
After making headlines as the portal to hell, the house was demolished. This is where the family believes they became possessed. What started as persistent swarms of flies on the porch transpired into strange noises at night, and ultimately the mother's 12-year-old daughter levitating above her bed, unconscious.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or... And this is their new hoax. Asking a sarcastic and a very sarcastic question to the reporters in the room about disinfectant on the inside. But it does kill it, and it would kill it on the hands, and that would make things much better. That was done in the form of a sarcastic question to the reporters.
But you were asking your medical experts to look into it.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant.
In them before.
During that conversation, were there any sort of key red flags that made you concerned that this was something?
Took my crucifix, put it on her. She began convulsing. And then I took it off and she stopped convulsing.
Specifically said they've seen a spike in
you have an aversion to holy objects.
After your comments last week. I know you said they were sarcastic.
I can't imagine why. I can't imagine why. Yeah.
Take any responsibility?
No, I don't. No, I can't imagine. I can't imagine that. Yeah, go ahead, please. They have to get the shot. The vaccinations are so important. This is really going around now. They have to get their shots. Mr. President, how old is too old?
And that's the lingering question. Do demons exist? And do they inhabit the souls of people around us? What do you say to people who don't think demons are real?
There is no other explanation for certain things.
The role of the church is not to impose, but to propose. So one of the reasons I like to speak out on the topic of exorcism is just to help educate people with what the church actually believes and teaches. And then what people do with that is ultimately up to them.
Well, consider the context. After making a highly charged, emotional speech to the nation where he threatened military force, his officials cleared peaceful protests with tear gas and horses and walked onto the courtyard of St. John's Church and held up a Bible as if it were a prop or an extension of his military and authoritarian position, and stood in front of our building as if it were a backdrop for his agenda. And that was where, that was the offense that I was speaking to. I also was deeply disappointed that he did not take the opportunity. He didn't come to church to pray. He didn't come to church to offer condolences to those who were grieving. He didn't come to commit to healing our nation, all the things that we would expect and long for from the highest leader in the land.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. So the only way he figures that he's going to get reelected, and as sure as you're sitting there, is to start a war with Iran. Now, I'm more militant and more militaristic than the president. I believe in strength. But to start a war in order to get elected, and I believe that's going to happen, would be an outrage.
Trump, just yesterday, almost 100 foreign policy experts signed on to an open letter refusing to support you, saying you're embracing expansive use of torture is inexcusable. General Michael Hayden, former CIA director, NSA director, and other experts have said that when you ask the U.S. military to carry out some of your campaign promises, specifically targeting terrorist families and also the use of interrogation methods more extreme than waterboarding, the military will refuse because they've been trained to turn down and refuse illegal orders. So what would you do as Commander-in-Chief if the U.S. military refused to carry out those orders?
They won't refuse. They're not going to refuse me, believe me.
But they're illegal.
Let me just tell you. I'm going to put it very simply. The President of the United States has the authority to do what the President has the authority to do, which is very powerful. The President of the United States calls the shots. This is when somebody's the President of the United States, the authority is total. And that's the way it's got to be. The authority is total. It's total. And the governors know that. So if the governors know that. Now you have a couple of bands of excuse me. You have a couple. Could you rescind that order? You have a couple of bands of Democrat governors, but they will agree to it. They will agree to it. But the authority of the President of the United States having to do with the subject we're talking about is total.
You said when someone is President of the United States, their authority is total. That is not true. Who
okay,
told
you know what we're
that?
going to do? We're going to write up papers on this. It's not going to be necessary because the governors need us one way or the other, because ultimately it comes with the federal government. That being said, we're getting along very well with the governors, and I feel very certain that there won't be a problem. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Has any governor agreed that you have the authority to decide when their state
I haven't asked
back up?
anybody, because
But
I
no
don't,
one
you know why? Because I don't have to. Go ahead, please.
But who told you the president has the total authority?
Enough.
I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the you can do anything.
The rightful King of England.
Well, there you have.
On my way, let me just see if I can find my socks, and my shoes, and my trousers.
Disinfectant injection